There was no demo to do that.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Take the turnpike out.
I usually take the turnpike, but I hate it. Because I had to come.
I'm like, how'd that?
Like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah. How did you do that? You're probably doing 80 on 2.
No, do about 55 today.
You actually got that?
I slowed down to the construction. The construction area is about 45, 35.
I was going, there's all a fire or something there.
When the people are out doing construction, so I'm sure so people see people work on
Something
it.
shiny and sparkly.
What's that?
Something shiny and sparkly.
Yeah.
Ooh, squirrel. Squirrel.
Being ready to roll.
Talk to that guy. Got that? So this is good. Let's go. Just take a cup and put it in there. You feel so inclined. You guys are well welcome. It keeps you coming.
Well, I figure we'll get ready to go.
Yeah, I said go ahead.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for those online as well too. I'm John Mello from PhillyPoSH. 1/3 of the members of the Philly PowerShell use group. Other members are TJ and Lito. They're here as well. So let's just go through here. Today's presentation will be 2013 Scripting Games Review, Tips and Tricks Learned. A lot of this will be stuff that I thought was pretty interesting, reading through the blogs from like June Blender, sorry, she hears this, Boprox, a few of the other people from PowerShell.org, and just reviewing some of the scripts myself that I thought were pretty interesting. So, just did our introductions. Basically, our meetings are held every first Thursday of the month for those who are new. Recently, we got an Office 365 account, so that's made it a lot easier for us to actually record and host meetings, which has been great. So this meeting will be hosted on our page at PhillyPoSH.org. We're hosted on PowerShell.org. So thanks to those guys for helping out. We're also on Twitter at PhillyPoSH. So be sure to follow us if you can. We post a lot of really cool information and links to our previous meetings and upcoming meetings. And as any other user group, we love when people want to present for us, or if you have any ideas of stuff you want to hear, stuff you want us to talk about, or stuff you want us to go over, just let us know. All right. Yes, if you guys want to help. So, basically, the scripting game. So, one of the awesome parts about the scripting games is basically the chance to see the actual techniques PowerShell users are employing and how they differ from standard practices you might read in books or stuff that Microsoft's actually teaching. Also, one of the benefits is it's a way for the community to kind of catch and point out any issues before they become deeply rooted. Any bad practices become very apparent. I'm not sure if anyone's been on PowerShell.org, but they've had a great series of the great PowerShell debates where people go over basically techniques that seem to fall on one side of the camp, or polarizing techniques. If you haven't, definitely check that out. They're actually really good. And people are kind of sounding off in the comment section why they like point A over point B. And also, it's learned about some really cool, unique techniques you wouldn't have never thought about or never realized. A lot of really cool stuff I learned for the first time, just reviewing a lot of people's scripts and seeing how they work. There's a lot of things that I saw that I was like, wow, I never thought I'd even try that. So, basically, I'm going to kind of go through the questions one by one and give a few talking points from here. Anyone who wants to interrupt, let me know, either in person or online. So basically, question one was relatively easy one. It was basically just move a bunch of log files that are named with a random GoId.log older than 90 days from 3 separate directories to 3 separate destination directories while maintaining the folder structure. So as example here, moving logs from application log app1 to NAS server archives app1. So one of the things I thought was actually pretty cool here is there's a lot of different ways to go about pulling from the 3 separate folders and directories. Originally, when I did it, I was using getChild item path, the actual path, and then recurse and filter. One of the things I didn't realize when I first did it, if you don't include the quotes around log, you'll actually grab really weird things. You would grab log 123, because it was looking for anything that kind of matched that, and then kind of viewed without those without those quotes. It was kind of looking for anything around that. So that was the first thing that kind of bit me when I did this as well. And I didn't even realize until somebody actually pointed it out in something, a different script I saw. Another really cool technique I saw was someone not even using the recurse parameter. Basically, they just did a /star/star.log. Basically, what this does, it'll recurse one directory below, but won't search directories below that. Like, this is a really cool technique if you know you want to grab every folder within that one folder structure, but you don't want to go deeper. You don't want to recurse like 10 folders down if that's the case. So that was actually another really cool way to kind of limit how you're recursing without then going the whole tree and kind of like make sure you're definitely within your range you're looking for.
It won't do the current directory either.
No, it'll just do it'll do not the current directory, it'll do everything in the, yeah, it'll do everything it'll do everything, all the folders in log, it'll look in those folders for anything that has star.log. So I've not tried to see if it searches in log as well for that. I'm going to assume it might. I'll have to actually test it. That's a good point. We can probably test that a little bit. The question was, would it actually search? So for the second item, application/log/star/wildcard log, would it actually search just the folders in the log folder, or would it search everything in the log folder, even stuff on the root?
It won't search log, the contents of log, it only search down one level. So that's correct.
Okay.
Because you don't have reverse, so it knows to look for one, I'm assuming, for everything that's happened on log.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's worth trying. Keep that in mind. If we have some time, maybe we'll give it a quick whirl and see what happens. So one of the other things that I actually found out that was pretty interesting from this as well was, obviously this question requires some sort of looping function to kind of go through all the directories. And one of the big things I originally thought was like, okay, well, do I use a for each loop or a for each object loop? And like, what's the difference between the two? So luckily, a lot of people did help me out with this on the PowerShell.org blog-wise. So for each, as in for each user in department, is like an actual loop. It'll loop through each object and actually return it out. But what it'll do is it actually will gather all the objects first. So it's going to load everything in memory first and then process through the loop. While for each object actually, so for example, piping computers a for each object. For each object is actually not a loop. It's actually like a commandlet. So it'll process items one at a time as they come through. What this means also, if you're going to use something like break or continue, like say you have something along the lines where, if you're let's say for each user in department, if the user doesn't exist or no longer exists in that list, you can say, instead of continuing the work, break and continue and go to the next user. If you do a continue on for each object in a similar situation, it's going to break whatever's above for each object, because for each object's it's basically one-time iteration for every object that's passed to it. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind that has bit me multiple times when trying to do a loop and kind of breaking out of it. One of the things to keep in mind, since for each loads everything in memory, if you're working with a huge data set, it's got to load all that into memory before it actually does anything with that data set. So for large data sets, a lot of times for each object's a little bit quicker, since it'll process stuff one at a time anyway. And that way, if you have an error that is like a terminal error that totally kills your script, it'll at least do whatever it did before it failed. Whereas for each is going to fail. If it fails loading it, it's going to fail altogether and not process anything until it's loaded everything. Any questions? All right. So one of the ones is don't repeat calculations in the pipeline. I was actually guilty of this on one of the events. So for example, in this instance, it's basically get child item. We're going through the directory and we're saying where object within the pipeline, and we're doing the calculation right there, get date dot add days minus 90. The problem with that is that every time that gets looped through the pipeline, we're doing that same calculation over and over and over again. Luckily enough, this is not a huge calculation, but you want to be wary, especially when you're doing like any sort of crazy calculations within the pipeline like that, because that will really add like extra processing that you really don't need. What you'd like to do is actually just save it beforehand, do the calculation just once, and then actually run through the pipeline that way. So it's once again either like the old filter left or mentality. You definitely want to make sure you get all your brunt of your work out of the way, like as high above the pipeline or before the pipeline if possible.
It also helps if you're moving across dates too. If you're doing something near midnight, you're processing the same date versus.
Exactly. So yeah, another thing is in this sort of situation, if you're doing a long process, like say your process happens to go over midnight, like say you happen to run it at like 11:55, or maybe if the script runs for 2 hours, the time is going to change every time it goes through a pipeline as long as the script runs. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well. Whenever you use date at all to judge something, make sure you save at least one instance of it somewhere. Don't keep pulling the date if you're going to do any date judgments. Pull it once, save it, work with that one date. All right, so question 2 was using a list of IP addresses in a text file. Pull the following information and display it to the console. So computer name, install version of Windows, physical memory installed, the number of processors, and socket. So basically this was a question that why don't you use WMI against a series of computers and pull information. So one of the things I thought was really interesting, because a lot of times I see stuff in PowerShell and I just like, I've never used this, I'm never like going to use this, I have no clue what it does, so I'm just going to ignore it. It's when a few times I actually saw something that I've always passed over, and when I actually saw it in use, I actually thought it was pretty cool once I actually saw how it worked. So basically the pass-through parameter, it's available in a handful of commandlets, not available in everything, like a dash verbose or like what if is available, so it's not one of the common parameter sets, but it's on a lot more parameters than I thought it was. So basically, what it does is it returns the actual object you're working with. So for example, if you're using copy, like the copy item commandlet, and you copy something, basically nothing gets done. Nothing gets returned back to the screen or the console. You're basically doing copy item, it's copying the item, and that's it. You're just, okay, cool, this works. When you're using pass-through, it'll do that as well and return the item, the object. So the cool part is it'll return the object so you can still work on it. And I'll show you a quick example. Let's see if I can get this on the other side. Oh, I should just share both screens. So, so I'm going to share screen 1. Actually, no, share both monitors. All right, so hopefully everyone can see this. All right, so basically, so if we did like start process, Notepad, normally it's just going to start the process. As you can see here, Notepad's being started. Oh, really? No, sorry about that. I got to put the other screen. So I'll give you a second here. Just the fun of working with 2 screens at once. And you guys in the link call should be just fine, but we'll wait for the screen to pop in over here. No? No? I'm just leaving duplicate mode. All right, cool. All right, so here I'm going to so if I do start process, basically what it does here, just starts Notepad. You see it's basically nothing gets returned to the console. If I do pass through, you'll see it actually returns the process name and everything else here. So cool part about this is when you're doing this, you can actually save it to a variable. So here, I'm actually saving it to a variable while I'm launching it. So now I still have that actual variable itself. And I can actually work on that variable as well. I can see actually when it was started, or session ID. Like here I can see the start time. And one of the cool things is it's still open. Let's bring you off again. So one of the cool parts is you can actually work on that process. So I can actually stop that as well. And you see it closed down here. So that was what I thought was like actually really cool. I never used pass-through before, and I never knew what it did. So for example, in this, and I forget the person's name who actually did this and who on the blog post it was, so I apologize for that. But basically, so in my entry for the beginner space for this information, I basically just did a get WMI object, namespace. Now, the biggest issue with this one event was you had to pull information from two separate namespaces, so from two separate WMI containers, and combine that information in the one output. So basically what I did is I kind of did a kind of, I guess, hack-and-hide way of doing it. I pulled everything from the first one, which is Win Computer System. That gave me total physical memory, processors, logical processors. The operating system I had to pull from a totally different one. So basically I just used the method where you kind of relabel an item using select object, kind of in a hash table format. Basically I did a label OS, and my expression, I basically just pulled the entire, all the information from the separate class. And it works. Gives you everything you need. But using pass-through I thought was pretty interesting. So basically, similar situation, works with Win Computer System, but they're actually piping it to add member. So keep in mind this information returned here is like a custom object you kind of like, well, it's an object you return that you can actually still work with and add stuff to, since it's not the actual object itself. So what they did with the entry you had to use pass-through, added a new member, and actually got the information and then just passed it through, which returned it into the object. So just to show you how this works, like I said earlier, note we're returning like an actual management object, and here's all the information. The second portion here, you can see that it works that we're pulling a single portion. So normally when you add a member to an object, we don't get the object returned, just like I showed you with start process notepad. Pass-through allows you to return that object. So that's why when the final object is returned, when adding, it actually gets added to the first portion. So like I said, I thought it was actually pretty cool. So if I actually look here, I think I have it pass-through get member. You'll see that it actually added it earlier, because earlier when we had it by itself, just had name, number of processors, total physical memory. And now we added it, we actually got the OS version to it as well. Like I said, I thought it was pretty cool. It took me a bit playing with it, because when I first saw it, I quite didn't understand exactly how it worked. And I kind of had to fiddle with it a bit. But it was interesting. Let's get back.
Either one faster than another, or I mean, it's nice to be able to manipulate the you get the object return, you could potentially manipulate it and do what you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Just, curiosity, is either one faster than another?
I didn't test, to be honest with you. Yeah, no, I thought it was just an actual, just cool way of doing things. So, let's see, go real quickly here, make sure there's no scheme pipeline, Dexter, hopefully. Let's see, is anyone scheme pipeline?
I'm still not sure I understand quite what the difference or advantage is to do a pass-through as opposed to piping something into a variable.
Well, this so
I
you
know
can.
what you're saying at first when you start talking. I'm like, oh great, yeah. If something doesn't return it to the console, then you would have it in memory. But
Oh no, this is just so basically using pass-through. So if I just start, like for example, if I just started Notepad, I have no way of interacting with that once it's done without actually going to get process, search for Notepad, and then killing it.
Not everything, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just some. I mean, you won't. It's not something you're going to use like with everything you start. It's just one of those like cool things where you just kind of
Yeah.
wouldn't think of before.
Lost you when you were doing it with that other thing a second.
Mm-hmm. And no, Dexter, I've not seen that just yet. I've actually haven't had a chance to play with PowerShell 4.0. All right, let's get back to presentation. All right, so one of the other things was that came up a lot was actually using splatting. So basically, splatting allows you to save your parameter entries in a hash table and then present them to a command. The cool part about this is it makes it kind of easier to, especially if you're doing a long string of different long parameters to a command, or if you want to be able to put the same 5 parameters with the 6th one being different, you can easily change those out. It also makes it much easier to read in a script, especially when you have like a really, really long section. Like for example, I'll go over an example with pulling information for AD users. So basically the way splatting works. All right, so say for example here, this one's not too bad. So send email message to user domain from subject. It's slightly long. Luckily it's not too bad, but what you can do is create a hash table. So I'll create a hash table called just email. I make my key and value pair, so I make sure the keys match up the values that I want to use. So parameter to username from, etc., etc. That way, I can just do send mail message at email, which is kind of much easier to read this than opposed to this, especially if you're on a smaller screen. And the cool part is, if I want to send that email to somebody else, all I have to do is just reference the key and change the new value, and that'll give me the actual new changed value. So real quickly, I'll show you that. I apologize, I don't have F8 on this keyboard, so I can't run it. So you see we have all the information here. So what we can do is actually just change the key right there.
Keys enclosed in square brackets.
Yes, correct. Sorry. Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, the key's enclosed in square brackets. So if I bring that up again, you'll see that it's actually. You'll see it's changed the new user. Now, where this helps out in like a later example. So,
Oh, so it's not square brackets, it's braces?
No, it's
square brackets.
Really braces.
Look at the command.
You're talking about the email to where you're
Email, and then he's got square brackets, quote, to, quote, square brackets.
Oh, so when you're creating a hash table?
No, up there, that's a block.
When
That's
you're
a block.
changing it.
Okay, down below where you're changing, he's calling a specific problem.
Oh yeah, that's in
The
squares.
key, that's squares.
Yes.
That's what I was talking about. Okay, sorry. That's the thing you can't really see.
Oh,
High
yeah.
contrast lines.
Yeah, sorry that.
I see it.
So
See it better in the command.
yeah. So where this actually became an issue for me recently, I had to write a script that pulled like a bunch of location information for AD users. And as you can see here, like for example, I had to pull department, telephone number, mobile, physical delivery office, employee ID, other mobile, other telephone, street address. I think L stands for, it stands for like county or country, street, postal code, and then C for country, and an error action stop, which is a lot to read in like one script, especially on a small screen. So basically what I did is I just made a bunch of hash table called AD params. I gave just basically the same thing here. I gave all my parameters as keys and gave them all the values. That way I could just easily just do it right here. And it's much easier to read for someone who's actually going through the script. Any questions? Sorry.
The change,
Mhm.
square brackets, that change permanently.
Correct. It changed. Yeah, it changes because it changes the original hash table you created. So yeah, you want to change it back if you want to do something else again. But this is also good. Like say if you want to do like if you were doing it at the command line and you wanted to do a bunch of things over and over again, and you didn't want that like. I do this a lot of times where I'm doing something quickly, and I instead of like I hit like up arrow and then I like go back, or I hit home and I scroll forward, change the one parameter I want, and then run the command again. This you can make it so that you can just grab all your parameters and then tab up, and it's the same thing, just change that one parameter and not have to worry about like kind of going through a long command, especially if you're working at the console itself.
John, can you also, instead of doing square brackets too, can't you say like email dot to?
I think you can. Hold
I
on.
think I've done it that way. I learned that earlier last month.
I don't think so.
Like dollar sign,
Oh, was that?
Dollar.
maybe the dollar.
Oh, you that dollar for it? Oh, next.
I was right. I was right.
Oh, sorry, you're right, my
I found that
mistake.
I could do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. My mistake. I wonder, does anyone know if that's a 3.0 thing?
I don't know, but I just found it out. Like I say.
So I was having issues with that like early. I thought.
That's the beauty of PowerShell, you can do it through different ways.
Yeah. Nah, 'cause
I don't know which one's more efficient, but
Yeah, the checks
From a
I
readability standpoint, that might be easier too.
yeah, because I've had issues doing that like at work. It just doesn't work for some reason, and I'm not sure. Like I said, if that's a 2.0 sort of 2.0, 3.0 situation.
Well, if you're using it with AD, it might also be your AD provider. Like, it might be, since it's 2003,
Mm-hmm.
it might be some of that.
Okay.
So,
Could be.
you never know. I mean, there's lots of different.
Yeah. So you have two ways to do it.
What's to make a hash table? You can copy it just by saying this
Variable equals variable, whatever it is on the other side.
Yeah, because that way you could.
Yeah, I think it has a copy to command too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and that. Okay. You do something like that. All right. So on to question 3. Question 3 was pretty much grab the following information from each drive on a PC: drive letter, drive size, drive free space. The question in general basically led you to believe that you were going to hand this command off to somebody and have a bunch of people run it. So that was kind of emphasized. And basically they wanted you to say the results is an HTML report with a timestamp. So yeah, the command was supposed to meant to work on multiple different computers. So the big question is, a lot of people, and myself included, made the mistake of hard coding the path in the script. You can't assume, especially when you give a script to somebody, that they're always going to have the same path as you have. So one of the things you do is avoid that. And a great way around that is you can actually use one of the PowerShell's default variables. For example, $PWD for present working directory. That'll save whatever you're looking at in the present working directory of whatever the console says. If your console says C system or C Windows system or C username desktop, it'll save it there. So you can actually do like if you want to do, for example, it's returning directory here, so you can actually do like /test. Obviously it's not there, but if I wanted to go cd dot dots, oops, sorry. And one of the things it won't let you tab complete, keep that in mind. So you can see that you can still use it as like a variable sense as well too, as long as you have it there. A few other ones are using the environment variable :temp, that gives you the OS temp directory, and user profile gives the current user root profile. There's a bunch of other ones they have there, but those I think are the ones you can probably work with the easiest. So yeah, basically overall, if you're working in a script and you have to have it save anywhere, unless you know it's always going to be in the same place, then definitely use one of these, and especially if you're handing it to someone it's going to dump something for them. Using convert to HTML. I've been very guilty of this. So one thing I'll start off before I can go there is I've been very guilty of using convert to HTML to make very horrible HTML files for people. I just recently realized that every time you use convert to HTML, it inserts a body, title, and like closing tags. So if you do multiple convert to HTMLs to an HTML and save it, you're actually adding multiple HTML open closing tags, multiple open body close tags, multiple like title and title close tags, which makes most like web developers cringe when they see those sort of things. So I probably should put that other part first. But there's a lot of actually really cool stuff, and I was always using convert HTML just to dump a table and call it a day. But they actually have some other commandlets I didn't really use until I started doing the scripting games. One of them is pre-content and post-content. These let you insert stuff above and below the table that's going to be outputted, and you can just pass a whole variable worth of HTML to these to put like a bunch of stuff up before and after. You can still use the body parameter to put stuff in the body, but this will place it directly above the TD tag and definitely below the TD tag. Fragment. So if you're going to be doing where you're making multiple tables, just to make sure your HTML is actually like legit HTML, it seems to, I guess I never realized it because it always worked for me and I never had an issue until I actually looked at the HTML and realized it was like all over the place. You want to use fragment. Basically what fragment's going to do, it's just going to create the table HTML. It won't create the full body HTML and title tags for you. That way you can kind of build a whole series of tables and then use convert to HTML, and then it'll kind of wrap them for you together. Like I said, that way it creates a properly formed HTML file. Head and title. These let you put like the headers and like the little title on the tab. Keep in mind that if you use the head parameter, so the head parameter is ignored if you use the title, but you can always specify it in the body. So you can always do, say, body parameter and put in your HTML the title section there. One of the cool things I never realized, I mean, I don't foresee me using it, but I thought it was pretty interesting, is the property parameter. I saw a few people use this, and I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it was interesting, but I was like, I don't know where I'd use it, but it was just nice to know. Basically, it allows you to pass an object. Object properties is a hash table, so that you, so only what you specify is shown. Like, it gives you the same results as if you were to do select object, but instead you go get process, convert to HTML properties, and actually rename the properties. I haven't, like I said, I haven't found an actual legit use to use this over just using select. I'm pretty sure somebody has it somewhere. I'm not sure if it's quicker or something along those lines. It was just interesting. And I thought it was just bring it up. So some of the advanced notes that I thought were interesting is they were kind of reinforced since a lot of people weren't doing this. And as I said, one of the bad habits that were taking root that the games help kind of put a stop to is basically you want to stick to standard parameter names, like computer names versus servers or workstations or anything else along those lines. If you absolutely positively need those, just use an alias to the standard ones. Also, to keep in your mind, you want to keep your parameters singular, not plural. So computer name, identity, mailbox, not mailboxes. One of the big things where this will be an issue, let's see everything else here. Here's back. One of the things is a big issue, and hopefully it won't be an issue in the future. I'm not sure how many people work with AD and Exchange, but if you ever tried piping anything from AD to an Exchange commandlet, it always bulks. Pretty much because a lot of the Exchange commandlets, like get mailbox, look for stuff by name. They don't look for the object. So if you do get AD user and then pipe it to get mailbox, it's always going to fail. That's because it's looking for something that matches identity as opposed to AD user object. And then you have to kind of just rename it along using select. Other AD stuff works fine together, and other commandlets, I think a lot of the link stuff works together just fine. And hopefully Microsoft will fix it in the future. But just to kind of make sure you have your stuff's on standard name, so you can pipe it to something else, make sure you follow the same names. Because a lot of commands look for that stuff by name, unfortunately, as opposed by object. All right, so question 4 was basically an auditor needs you to select 20 random AD accounts and pull the following information on them. Username, department, title, last logon time, date the password was last changed, and if the account was enabled, disabled, or locked out. And then once again, save it as the results in HTML report with a timestamp. So this is interesting because I made this mistake among many mistakes during the game. Basically, during the game, to get the 20 random users, I was doing get AD user filter, just star, so it grabs everything in AD, sort object, and just said get random, and then select the first 20 objects. I didn't even bother to look that get random had the ability to do that for me. I could have just did a random count of 20 as opposed to doing it further down the pipeline. So, for example, get AD users, filter star, pipe it to get random count 20. Basically, I didn't follow my own rules that I kind of put on the people at work, and I preach here is always read the help and always filter left whenever possible. When you actually do the timing on those commands, the second command is much quicker since you're not passing a full set of user objects down the line. And then using requires. I've never used the requires information before, and actually I was playing with it and I thought it was kind of pretty neat, just because of the stuff you get back from it. I'll show you in a second. But basically this lets you specify what is required by the script. It only works with scripts, not functions, by the way, prior to running the script, and it'll prevent it if those requirements aren't met. So it was an undocumented feature in PowerShell 1.0, officially released and updated in 2.0. So it can be used to check for the following things: PowerShell versions, PS snap-ins, shell ID, so you can make sure it works on a certain shell ID. Like either I think you can set it so it's like a 32-bit shell, 64-bit shell, one of the management consoles, and in 3.0 you can check for modules. You can use it anywhere in the script, but preferably it should be at the top. That way no one's hunting and pecking for it. So for example, requires PS snap-in quest.activeRoles AD management. So I think one of the great debates was if you should bother auto loading, especially in 3.0. Well, it's more not of an issue in 3.0, but in 2.0, if you should bother writing your scripts to auto load the modules and check if they're loaded, or if you just use requires and let the onus fall on the user themselves to preload the module for you. It seems like people fell in two separate camps in regards to that. Some people are like, screw it, the person should know. If I have requires, it'll tell them, they'll load the module and run the script from there. Other people are like, well, no, your script should auto-load the module or try to auto-load the modules and then report back that it couldn't load the modules, as opposed to not running whatsoever. So different camps on that one. I fall in the try to load do everything as you can for the user beforehand.
You should have it try to auto-load, and then if it requires after.
The problem is requires will always run first. So, for example, I gotta figure out if I can run this. So let's see. If I do, so for example, in this one, I do a requires, is this version 1 compatible? So basically I'm saying I just require PowerShell version 1. Obviously it's going to pass this. Current script is disabled. Oh, I never set my execution policy on this machine. That's what I get for not doing PowerShell on my whatchamacallit. Restricted. Good spell. That's right. Let's see if it works. Anyway.
R2 will set that automatically.
XE.
You have two different scopes there, John.
What was that?
You'll have two different scopes.
Yeah, I know, but I'm going to close it anyway, so I figured just get it out of the way. I'll relaunch you. And I'll just go back to you. So where's the ones? Let's see, requires. Actually, let me save this to C drive, make life a lot easier on us. So I get for not running this beforehand. Okay. Then because active roles. Oh, so no, sorry, I have two requires in here. All right, so it'll read. What did I not realize? It'll read multiple require statements. Actually, did not realize that. So you can have multiple require statements. I should have mentioned that earlier. So I have a requires version 1 and a requires PS snap-in, Quest Active Directory active roles. As you can see here, I try to run it. It says the script cannot run because the following snap-ins that are specified by the require statement in the script are missing.
So even if you have an act snap-in, nothing can help you, so it's going to run the requires first.
Yes. The requires always gets run first. So
People will definitely have to preload it.
yeah, exactly. That's why I prefer preloading. I mean, granted, I think it's not an issue in 3.0 when you're auto load if it's local, but in 2.0 it's sort of a pain. So basically, now that I took that out, it works just fine. Cool part is it kind of so I played this earlier and I thought it was kind of funny. So say I want PowerShell version 45. It actually won't run because I require PowerShell version 45.0, which I thought was kind of amusing when I did it earlier. So you can set what versions of PowerShell it requires, especially if you know you're going to use a script that has a lot of like 3.0 or 4.0 specific stuff, like if you're doing your automatic for eaches or any other tricks in PowerShell 3.0 that aren't available in 2.0. you can kind of force the person to say, hey, make sure you're definitely running this, 'cause it's not going to work otherwise.
You had one in there before that one?
Oh yeah. So if I go, say it's, yeah, this is version 2. Well, I probably should put version 2.
So there's no way you can say that. I guess all the other ones are supposed to be backward compatible.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially, but you tell you it requires that version, like version 3, 4, 5, or 6. It won't run unless it requires you had that version.
Right, but your version 2 on here at least, right?
Version 3.
Okay, so.
It's just
Okay,
a,
so yeah. It's not like equals version.
yeah, no, it's like requires dash version and whatever the version is.
Assumption made that you're on version 2, 3, then you're on
Should run.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty cool. All right, so question 5. Question here was from multiple ISS logs and multiple folders, pull all the unique client IP addresses. The final result should only include unique IP addresses found across all ISS logs. So this is kind of interesting because I didn't realize that. So for get content, you can actually adjust how many lines of content it sends through the pipeline in 3 different ways using the read count parameter. If you leave it by default or don't specify it, it'll read line by line up, throw through the pipeline, do any work on it, go back to the next line. You can actually specify. So like say you're working on a document and you know your host system can read more than that at one time, you can kind of tweak and say, okay, read 9 lines at a time, or read 10 lines, or read 20 lines at a time, and just pull those and work on those. If you set it to 0, it'll read the entire text file in one shot and look for the information you need as opposed to going line by line.
This is a really good way of performance-arizing your script. If you have, like, IIS logs have a tendency to be very thin, very large. And you will hit memory constraints with PowerShell that change default memory constraints. You will hit memory constraints, and therefore you'll get halfway through the file and your script will burn.
Yeah.
It's not a problem with your script, it's a problem that you've gone outside the bounds of the memory of PowerShell. So this is a great way of basically cutting it down, saying, I'm going to read 100 lines, and then process these 100 lines, and I'm going to read the next 100 and the next 100.
Yeah, it's just a redirect for those online. It's a great way to like kind of performance optimize your script. If you know that, so you can know if your script runs fastest, it's not reading all the information, but it reads like 100 lines. Also, depending, sometimes you can't do read count 0 if you're working with a really large file, because you're running the PowerShell, especially if you haven't tweaked your PowerShell memory settings, you'll run into an instance where you'll kind of just like blow out the memory and PowerShell will kind of take a dump through the command and fail out for you. I think there's a recent scripting guy post on that as well. I think it was like last week.
One of the players of the advanced, he actually performance tuned it so that he actually tried which number on the read count is going to give you the best performance out of that for his script for this question. That's what he used to be able to do that. Whatever provider, I want to say it, I forget what provider it is, but he found that certain in that provider, if you use this number for read count, it perform better than all the other numbers.
Yeah, if you want to think of I think that same guy was on the PowerShell Theme podcast like a week or 2 ago, and he went over exactly how he fine-tuned his like version of the script for the perfect number and how he went about that whole process. Definitely a good list if you haven't already done it.
It may also make a difference if you might need to read the whole thing if you're using regex.
Yeah.
If you're using something where it actually finds something and then goes back.
Through.
Around and you might lose the data that it had.
Oh yeah, especially if you're doing like I think it's called a look ahead or a look behind regex, where you kind of need to know where you left off. And regex is a beast upon itself. But yeah, in those instances, you want to read the whole string, the whole file as a whole. That way you can use those look behind and look forwards. All right. So the last question that came up was question 6 description. Using a list of MAC addresses obtained from a text file, query the local DHCP server to match up the MAC address to a DHCP scope. Then join each computer to the domain under the same server, under the name server 1, 2, etc. This one actually I didn't get around to doing. This happened, unfortunately, this came to me on a weekend when I was really busy. But one of the really cool things that came up with this is the way people dealt with passwords. So basically, this event involved you adding computers to a domain. Obviously, you needed a password to do so. But a lot of people would put the password in the script. Not generally good practice. You definitely want to avoid it. But I mean, obviously, it's for the scripting games. You kind of left little to no option to do that because you don't have any control like how the other person's running it. So you kind of had to. But some people still had some really ingenious ways of doing it, which is actually pretty cool. So that they did some ways where you had to actually run a command to actually pull a jumble of text together and make it look like a password. So some examples were like basically involving conversions of hex to ASCII that at first glance look like garbage when you look at them. So if I can pull a few of those up real quickly, they're pretty interesting. So for example, so this one here, basically just looking at this, you kind of really have no clue what it is. Might even just look like something to you. It's like, oh, it's just some weird .NET garbage that the script is doing. But when you actually run it, you'll see it actually returns actual text. So basically what it's doing is it's just kind of parsing this out, and it's viewing each two number pair as a hex value and converting it to ASCII. You can actually prove it, like when I give out the notes, I basically just tested it myself to make sure that's actually hex. By going to another website and kind of doing a hex conversion to kind of get PhillyPoSH and kind of figure out what the code was. Here's a more complicated version. At least it looks more complicated. It took me a while to figure out what the hell was going on in this one. Basically returns the exact same results, PhillyPoSH, but basically what we're doing is we're using the hex string, and then we're using regex, and we have this complicated regex here. Basically it's saying to pull 2 characters at a time and send them down the pipeline. But all this stuff here is basically saying after you send the first characters, move to the next one, as opposed to just sending one character to the one, just picking 2 characters and sending them. It's doing a look behind. So okay, like I'm going back to this. Okay, I sent these 2 already. I go forward and move the next 2. And then basically saying, for each object, just basically change it to a character. So that was actually pretty cool. So it's a good way to actually save. I mean, it's still not a secure way, but it'll save you if you have no other means to do it, and especially if your scripts are on a network somewhere where they're being crawled. Like say for like say you're saving your scripts to a SharePoint site for your team or something along those lines. Obviously, there's a password in it. SharePoint's going to crawl that, so if you're searching for it, it's going to show up. At least in this instance, you have to put the password in there. You can at least hide it from someone looking for it, so they can't look for administrator password or something along those lines. Using secure strings in PowerShell, another way to do this as well. Basically, when you create a secure string, it uses the encrypted file system within Windows to create a hash that only your account can decrypt and, well, encrypt and decrypt. This actually took me a while to figure out at work because I was editing an issue in a script at work, and somebody had this. I kept running it, and I couldn't figure out why, for the love of me, I couldn't import this password file they made. And it wasn't until I found the account that they actually were running the script with and actually pulled the file in there to figure out why, like, at least that portion wasn't working. To do this, it's fairly straightforward. For some reason, it took me forever to figure this out, and I have no clue why. So, basically, give you an example. So we're going to save some credentials. We can either do get credential, where the screen actually comes up and asks me for the credentials, and I save them. Just so I don't mistype. I don't get credential, you can just type it in if you wanted to. I'm just going to do it this way. So basically, I'm going to save our user login as admin. Our password is test. I'm going to convert to a secure string. When you do it this method, you kind of have to force it. Normally, if you did get credential, it'll automatically save it as secure string for you because it already does that when you do any credential entering. Set it there. From here, I'm going to save it as a PS credential object. All right, so from here, I'm going to build a custom object, and I'm actually going to save those values to that object because what I'm going to do is I'm going to export that object as an XML file that I can use to just retrieve the password later. So basically right here, I'm just creating a new object just called export creds, adding a new member called username, and giving it the property of the user. Well, giving it the value of the username from the credential we just pulled. So just so you know, it actually has that info. Incoming. So you see here it has the username and password. The password's as a secure string. Basically, for secure strings, you have to actually convert them before you save them. Otherwise, it's just going to save it as a secure string by name, which is worth nothing. So when you actually convert it from a secure string, here's the actual hash that you're going to use to convert later. So what we're going to do is we're going to save this file. So our current working directory there. Cool. So if we actually go look for that file, you'll see we have a cred.xml file. And you'll see it has the username and the password and everything saved here. So the cool part is, if anyone besides me tries to load this and use this, they're going to get an error. It's not going to decrypt for them. But as long as my account, which encrypted it, brings it up, it'll work just fine. I'll show you in a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the credential in a new one. So I'm going to import that XML file. And basically, I'm going to save to a new credential. So basically, I'm going to say new creds, which are my imported ones, create a new PS credential object with the argument list of the imported creds, username, and the password. Now, the password I have to convert to a secure string because just like earlier, you'll see it actually has the information here. So I actually have to convert that to a secure string because if I just pass this as the password, it's going to go, I don't know what this is. It's not a pass. This is not your password. So I have to convert it back to a secure string object. And you'll see when we do it here. And now it's a type secure string, and you'll see it has like all sorts of methods associated with it. So let's do that real quickly. So now I have the new creds. Now the cool part, now that's an actual, now see it says password secure system string. The cool part about a credential object is you can actually decrypt that now. So if I do new creds and pull the method get network credential, it actually pulls the, where'd you go? Should I pull the password in? Can you make me a liar? Okay, cool. So yeah, if I do new creds, get network credential, password, it actually pulls the password we saved earlier. It actually decrypts it. So this is a really cool way if you need to, like, if you're on your own network and you can use credentials, but you don't want to save it in a file or you don't want to hide it using one of those methods. You just open the prompt like as the account that's going to be running the script, like say it's yourself or a service account, and then from there you just create this little XML file, and whenever you run that script, just make sure it's run by that account so it can pull in that XML file, pull in the credentials, and do whatever work it needs to do. You can also, if you don't want to use an account, there's actually a way you can present a key in like I think 16, 32-bit or 64-bit pairs. So for example, if I want to create a new secure string, so I'm going to read from the host test. Let's do another one, test 2. I can encrypt that and actually convert to a secure string, and then use a key of like 1 through 16. So basically, I'm giving it a 16-bit hash key, and just using, as here, I'm using 1 through 16 to do it since it's easy. So what I can do is actually save that out. So you see when I save it, where'd you run up to? So here's the encrypted password. And you'll see when I pull it back in using the same convert to secure string using the same key. So I'm saving it to secure 2. When I save it out, it comes back as this secure string, which I can then save as a credential and actually work with. Now, if I try to specify a different key in order to pull it in, I'll get an error basically saying the key is invalid. So you get a similar error if you use a different account to like decrypt that XML file that you made earlier. And it doesn't need to be an XML file. You can save it as a CSV, or a straight text file, you don't need to save it as a username. You can just save the password itself and just use the password import portion. I kind of like the idea of saving them together. That way they can be pulled at once. Anyone have any questions? So another method which works well, especially like in corporate environments, is kind of just create a service account that does all that for you. Like just give a service account with a random long password. Give it through just enough permissions to do what you need the script to do in like either AD, Exchange, Link, or whatever else, and just have that as a scheduled task and have that account run it. That we don't have to worry about decrypting passwords, saving passwords, or someone getting a hold of that account and doing stuff because only you know the password and hopefully it's saved somewhere else. So that was it for me. Anyone have any questions? Let me just check the link chat real quickly. There we go. No questions here at all. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate that. I think next we're going to do a script and tell.
Yeah.
All right. Who has stuff doing a script and tell?
I can start. So, Tom, you had some stuff that you wanted to share with the group, right?
Sure, you have it all down.
We do. We have it.
Yeah.
Just take a minute to get set up, and then if you want to come up, you can use this because it's sharing out to the people. Did you look?
Anybody had time?
Anybody who is interested, it's open to
Sure.
whoever has anything they want to share. I have some stuff. I think. Did you have anything?
I just had a few cool things I came across recently that I thought were interesting.
Okay.
Nothing crazy. I figured to fill time if you need
Time
time.
to share that other one. I can't. I just didn't know how many other people would read.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Can you email it to him?
Sure.
Yeah, just john.mello at PhillyPoSH.
Let me see if I can find it here.
That'll work.
You get my stuff on the computer.
Yeah, we should. So what is?
Sorry, I got that one, and it was
Yeah,
scripts.
It's like in a yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just open PowerShell.
Yeah, we'll sit in the bar now. Thank you. This guy. So I had like the link thing up as well. Cool, so in separate windows.
Another way that I've seen that pass through frame is with when you're creating new objects.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you see it set out on a bunch of different lines. Like you create a new object called data.
Can I jump in?
Take
Yeah, no, go.
line down, you say data, type that to add member, and then you create a listing of property, blah, 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 and here's the value. If you put on the end of that, pass through, like that, you don't have to then go to the next line, say, do everything all over again, you say, okay, you have another number, you just kind of name it to that number. That's the primary way that I've seen the pass through done in a lot of scripts. I've never seen it done with WI, which is quite interesting, because it's still two individual WI calls within the same line.
That's why I thought the Notepad description made more sense, because that way it's like you can still manipulate that object and you're done with that. Like so, you can have your script call like Notepad, or say you want to call any exe, and that way you can call the exe, have the object saved to the variable, let the exe do whatever work it's done, and that way PowerShell is not like, okay, now I need to search get processed for the same exe. What if somebody else started the same executable and I have two of them I have to worry about? That way you know exactly which one you're working with, and you can kill it when you're done. Not that I would need to do that often, but I thought it was pretty cool.
I'm just cleaning these up, so if you guys wanna come on up, I think. This is the mouse is very there you go.
Very straight here.
All right, we're all live and everything?
Yeah, man.
All right, that's
Yeah.
cool. All right, my name's Tom. I'm a systems engineer and was a SCCM admin and doing Windows Server admin. I have a historical Unix background as well, and I'm currently doing Oracle. But I like to dabble in this stuff. I was doing the SQL administration as well. So Mike and I periodically just need to do find a little information for this, that, and the other thing, and so we like to collaborate. But the first one here, get a directory listing from size and file. I think we had we're doing the Windows 7 rollout, and we had the USMT user state migration tool backing up the profiles up to a NetApp file share, and periodically wanted to get an idea how big that would be. You know, how often do I need to clean that directory up, type of thing. So what was nice is for the server hosts and share value. You know, you just plug in whatever your host value is and in your share. And what was nice about the PowerShell, at least from my perspective, is that you could just instantiate it and not have to worry about creating anything fancy. Again, I consider myself a junior novice PowerShell guy and not a great scripter, but for me this is a wow feature. So just setting a variable collected items here, and then searching through the get child items for the path, and recursively go through the directories, and then using the measure object and getting the property of length sum, and then select the object of sum specifically. One of the challenges that was coming out of that was that you really didn't get the right value. It was hard to get just those long byte counts. I'm not.
It's like a 16 character numeric alphabet.
Let's see if we can change this here to.
Are you getting like straight bytes? Like, I can't read it.
It would be like, there's 52,999.5372. I don't know if you want to reverse the whole.
Do you have a temp directory? This keyboard's interesting.
Yeah, no, the problem is since the Surface, the keyboard doesn't lay right, so I have to use a secondary keyboard as opposed to the flip over one.
You good?
Okay. So see if we can get this to run. There's nothing in it. So let's try.
I think your call items variable is populated.
So let's see if we can.
You can run variables, so if you got
Let's see what we got there.
Yeah, you're not.
Yeah, it works. Woohoo! So for me, that was kind of exciting. You know,
Do it without that.
right. So if you were just to do.
$2 columns. Just $2 columns.
Yeah, so one of the cool parts about PowerShell is that it knows a lot of already math conversions for you. So it'll read like megabytes, like gigabytes and stuff like that. So you can get away with like not having to worry about saying I need to times this by like 1024 bits and times that again by X amount or something along those lines. It has all that stuff built in for you, which is really cool.
So, sorry, Tom, do the call item sum /F1 MB. That's what that's where we had the issue.
Yeah. So it was a really simple exercise. It wasn't fancy here, but it was just trying to get a manipulating of something with intuitive number value. Sometimes I just want to see megabytes or gigabytes or terabytes, whatever. So it was trying to figure out how to.
Decimals.
Yeah. So
You have like
go ahead, Mel.
10 decimals.
You can define it as an integer. I did a lot of this recently for a hardware inventory project that we're doing. And I just defined it as an integer, and then I'll slap off the 2.18 blah, blah, blah right away. It'll round it right to the nearest whole number.
But if you start doing gigabytes or something like that, then a half gig is actually a meaningful amount. So
True.
that's why we did the 0 and 2. it actually tells it to only show two
Decimal values.
points.
And that was something I didn't. Is this on the? This obviously on the network then. I think I got how to do that from this link here.
Yeah, I purposely wanted it to do that because I was dealing with something from System Center that was actually wrong. The total physical memory in the System Center is actually not the total physical memory. So I let it round up. Yeah, it's actually the total physical memory would be Win32 memory array max address. But for some reason, System Center, when they programmed it, it's really grabbing total physical memory or total available memory from Win32. So.
How we stumbled across this is we found this web page here, and we just kind of fumbled through this and read through it. So that's why I wanted to leave the attachment in there. So anybody that wants to, if you're curious of how it was done, again, I'm very much junior for this stuff, so it's not doesn't always come intuitively for me. But we can just rip through here, and
I think we tried to use mod and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's like this. Yeah, it's just formatted different.
The formatting string function is really, really great at making your strings very easily readable in your script. I use it quite frequently with a lot of my strings just because I have a lot of complex equations at the end of my strings. Like I get date, I gotta format it into a year, month, day kind of scenario. Well, instead of putting all of that computation there in the string, it's always at the end, and it makes it.
yeah, it's certainly I've been using it a lot when I need to simplify stuff. I could just toss it in there and see if the spaghetti sticks.
The one.
Yeah.
Just to touch on that a little bit. So one of the cool parts about this, also I'm going to point out here for just saying here. So one of the cool parts is for the actual here the 0 in front. Like you can have a string. So say if you did if you had like a whole string of numbers, like say like this is a percent. I can't spell percent. Sorry everybody. And this is a whole number, like something along those lines. You can do the format, and basically, so the 0 will reference the first item that you actually want to format. And then the next, like say if you want to do another one, so you could do a full string's worth of stuff and use different formatters for everything in that string.
It's an array, basically.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact number. I'm not sure the exact way you do it. I think you have to actually do like say you want that to be your number, you would do something along the lines of
You actually have to put formatting at the beginning.
And then it's like format, and then you just have your variable. I forget exactly how it's done. I did it multiple times before, but look into that if you want to do like multiple things in a row that way. I've used it multiple times when I want to include a percent, a whole number, and then something else within the same string. That way I can use like different formatters around it.
Thanks, John. So from a novice perspective, for me, I thought that was really cool, just to be able to just quickly slice and dice and just throw it in anywhere. Doing SSM administration, just wanting to get an operating system, because there'll be times I'll be running Windows XP or Windows 7 or now Windows 8, stuff like that. So this is not anything fancy, but it was just quick, down and dirty. Yeah, look at that, Windows 8 Pro. So last boot time was something else I thought was interesting in there, so you can also capture that. Server hardware, just calling a different iteration of the Windows 32 computer system. Instead of calling the operating system time, I'm calling the computer system. And we were using this to, we were running through a lot of different images, Windows 7 images of different hardware classes. Sometimes I wasn't always sure what serial number matching what hardware class what. So it was just, again, lightweight, down and dirty, just trying to get it going. And so we were using Lenovo's and HPs and whatnot, so I could get some simple reporting off of that. Let's see, this one here. I think the CPU information. What was interesting is I was trying to audit all of our SQL servers. So we had SQL Sprawl, and we didn't really have an administrator dedicated to it. So we're trying to just audit the information for all the servers. So we wanted to see how many CPUs as far as licensing and whatnot. So I found that there, you got, depending upon what you were looking for, it kind of came out a little different. Here we see number of logical processors, number of processors, but I think here, yeah, I think depending upon how much space we had out of it. See the long CPU. So Mike's idea was actually to wrap it, so we could actually something to CPU information wrapping around.
We have a different one that came up with afterwards, with shelf others.
If you didn't want all that other text in there, I did something recently again where I didn't want everything in the name. I just wanted the basics, so I split it into like 4 elements. I took the first 3 or 4 elements.
Oh, that's a good idea.
In my table, so I used the split function.
This is all the stuff from the both the stuff that both of us.
Yeah, yours is below this, sir.
Scroll down a little. See that line right above where your cursor is?
What line? 40.
That 38. Go over and copy the FT auto size. Copy the rest of that and paste it at the end of yours. Yeah, you have to scroll over a little bit.
I think we got it.
This is a perfect example. Down there, up. Format table wrap, paste it in.
What about
that there?
pipe it?
No, just paste it, replace format table, dash wrap with that. Because it's, okay, get rid of format table wrap. This is a perfect example where this fits in. Down on that one.
Yeah. Okay.
What you're doing is actually with the auto size out string and you're telling it a width, you're saying this is how wide your console is, so you don't have to actually bunch everything together. It will, if it can, because now it has all the room in the world.
I think I was looking for. Yeah. So.
Yeah, basically, out string is usually just telling how big the console is.
Yeah, but it actually shrunk it.
Yep.
That's what people want, so the auto size does, it takes it up this white space there,
Yeah.
jams all the
Yeah, but it's interesting that when you specify the width, it's actually 4K. You know what I'm saying? It seems like you're saying, oh, I got a monitor that's 4K wide, but it resulted in a display getting shrunk. It's kind of.
Yeah, you may not.
Would you have the same result if you didn't put the width in there, and just double it on the size?
No.
No, it'll wrap like I did earlier because it's going to try to fit it in its default like container size.
Yeah, when I was looking at it using this, it was if you do a wrap and you have long text and it goes like this and it goes line to line, and it does it here as opposed to wrapping to the next line. So if you take the output and put it into Excel, it's not going to. Lines are going to be like this. Like you'll have a lot of white space where it's not like pure text. That way you'll actually get everything coming there.
Yep. No. Cool. Another thing I was doing is just trying to get the memory. Something simple. You know, again, I'm trying to get SQL servers, how much memory, how much CPU is in there, stuff like that. So initial iterations, you can see this is 3.89 gigabytes. So here's just the GBs added here as the text notation there. Using you get WMI object Windows 32 computer systems, but we had to figure out how many times to divide by 1024 by 1024 to get what we wanted. Later I realized that we could just, I don't know where we stumbled across this, but
I think John.
Was it John? Same information. And confirming it, we can go back to the system properties. You can see 3.89 or 4 gigs. So it was just an interesting exercise of getting memory, and easier to read. Yeah. SQL services. I wanted to know what services, what service account was running the SQL server. So in this exercise, I was calling the services and seeing what kind of match I could get out of it, and these are the specific features I wanted out of there. You're not going to have a SQL running on here, so. But we could probably call any other services in here. We're going to match something else.
WMI. WMI should definitely be.
So it's running as a local system account. So when I was just stringing this stuff all into one little quick commandlet type of thing, running it against one of the SQL servers, I get the memories, type, CPU, and what service accounts it was running off. Again, really lightweight, light duty, but junior level, just trying to leverage what I knew and what was available, and getting rudimentary information. But for the beginners that are out there in the field, hopefully this helps them get a little more comfortable just running some scripts.
Thanks.
Yep.
You have to commentary on mine now. Okay. The arc mouse. Okay.
I'd say your name for who you are for the online participants.
What's that?
I'd say your name and who you are for the online participants.
I'm Mike Sims. I work with Tom. Windows administrator, NetApp, Citrix, a whole bunch of different stuff. We all do 15 different jobs. Always nice to learn new stuff. Includes this. The main line for this was actually to show off the auto size, but I think adding it to Tom's actually helped show a little bit more where you actually get some things in. I'll run this command just to, it just, as was said, it cuts out the white space, tells it there's more. If it actually goes longer than that, the line will actually wrap around on the console, and when you copy it, the end of line mark is later on, so you'll actually, copying the screen, you'll actually get something that you can paste into Notepad or Excel and actually have it on single lines.
So it's kind of like word wrap or like text edit.
Yes, as opposed to column wrap like they use in that. I felt that to be a lot more friendly if you're going to be parsing the data later. Okay, has anybody used the newer versions of search past XP where you do searches and you know the data's there and it just doesn't find it? Like the file searches.
Yeah.
The XP file search, you could say, search for this in this type of file, and it would say, okay, here it is. These files contain it. A lot of the things they've chopped out are no longer searched, they're not indexed or something like that. So from my understanding, Windows search just doesn't find a lot of things. So it got frustrating when I was trying to find some very particular items. So this was a combination of things. Let's see. This is going to search for file contents and return the file names. This is equivalent to the XP where you have the second line, which was search for this content, and you could put star dot whatever, and it would just function. So I don't know if you want to. Okay. Do you mind if I look in CTemp to see what you have?
I can allow.
Okay. Okay to open this?
Yeah, that's.
I don't know what's in it, so
Okay, so I'll just do a search for like MSI in temp. This one. Yep. So temp folder. And if you're using this command and you have something with paths in it that you're looking at, because the slash is actually something that's an escape character, you need to put 2 of them. So there are certain characters you may need to use slash something instead of just that by itself.
Now, could you wait that you use single quotes?
I don't know. I didn't try that.
So I think if double quotes, it's going to try to so if you do single quotes with a variable name, it's going to push the variable name as is, $, whatever.
I think this was more the search method
Well, that's
itself.
what I'm saying. When you have double quotes, it assumes that you want to if it finds a variable or escape character, it's going to try to expand it or use that character. You may be able to get away with that using just single, like the actual looking for in single quotes. It'll say, I need to look for exactly this. I'm not going to look. Even if you have a escape character or a backtick, it's going to read it as a backtick as opposed to, backtick, I need to do something immediately after this backtick.
Okay.
So you're saying the single quote instead of double quote?
Yeah, single quotes will let you away to C:/. Probably when you use, like I said, when you use double quotes, it's PowerShell's okay, cool. If I find the variable, I find special regex characters, I find like a backtick T, I know it's a tab, so I'll put a tab here. But if you put single quotes, it's going to be like, hey, this is just a backtick T, or this is just $ variable.
It's just a literal.
Yeah, literal. It's not going to, that's nowhere else.
So since I'm doing this on the fly, hopefully this will function. So it actually comes back with the files that contain MSI someplace in them.
All right, can you do me a favor?
Mm-hmm.
Can you go to Explorer and search for that in that directory
Sure.
so that you can show me what didn't?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's actually. We'll see if it. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so that's only finding the file. It's not looking in it, right?
Yeah, you can actually do file containing, or containing colon.
Well, you can
well.
also do it if you click on the advanced in the search right up there. See the advanced options? It's up right there. If you click that and click on file contents here, and now rerun that search, that will now search in the files. I was just curious as to where you.
It actually only. Let's see. Rerun. And it's only finding.
Maybe close it before I
You can change your options.
Okay.
Or
Go to that.
just make sure it's
See?
set.
Yep.
Rerun Windows.
No, Windows 8.2. And make sure this advanced options section.
Okay, so it's not actually finding the MSI there.
Yeah, because there's certain things that it won't search, like log files. It won't actually search in them.
But do star MSI. I'm just curious to see if this, because this works on my computer, no problem, because I use it all the time.
Star.
Just star.
Star.
Don't worry, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm not finding that. I'm just curious. That's weird because on my machine, while you were talking about that, I did that and created something in a file, and it found it no problem.
I think that's what you're index.
Well, I think he's saying basically if it's a log file, it doesn't search in log file.
Well, that's what I did. I created
Okay,
it in a log file. Yeah. I was just curious because I've never seen that before.
I've had a lot of problems with search,
Okay.
and I just got real frustrated one time, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way of doing this where it'll just tell me what it is.
Yeah, I have also customized this install and all that you can see. Like I did set the script execution policy. It's a little work I've done on this.
I was just curious because I've never seen it.
I have to say, like, inherently PSIs aren't indexed, so you have to go in and tell it, at least in 1.7, to index PSIs if you want to search the content or anything about them. And so I just, in my opinion, that's how you put it into.
Yeah, so-
the same issue.
So this would bypass that. You don't have to set up anything. You can say look from the C drive all the way down. It might take forever, but just it's the annoyances that it just get me, and I'm just like, it's got to be okay. And come across this, and then that leads to something else, and so on and so forth. Let's see. So now we also had, working with Tom on a couple of things, we have an FTP server where we had, yeah, it's not this anymore, now we're on here. We had a whole bunch of log files that contained, what are they, Tom? Like,
So it's any transaction that's happening in the FTP server, just getting dumped the logs, and the logs are valid for 1 day period. You know, any activity was just getting dumped to this thing. And we wanted to do some maintenance on the FTP server. We wanted to try to find a
quiet window.
No activity.
Yeah.
But from the logging, you know, my initial interrogation, which is spitball, taking about 5 days worth, it looks like every second or every minute, there was a connection states.
Yeah, some people are connecting every 6 seconds because they're hitting multiple scripts are hitting it. So every 6 seconds, there's at least one connection from this one site to our external FTP server.
Yeah, so we wanted to find when we were going to do it. I initially looked at it and it looked like it was no help, chance of help, that we're going to be able to migrate this for any downtime. And Mike started doing a more thorough investigation with seeing actual specific patterns. Just because we have a connection doesn't necessarily mean there's transactions. So, you know, a cron job would just trigger, go, just reach out, you know, with no catch or push or anything. And I think Mike did a more thorough investigation and we were able to, which you don't want to see here is he did a really amazing job with Excel spreadsheet to give you some markers.
Yeah, I was able to get almost, this actually extracts individual lines of the text in each thing, puts them into a string. So it keeps everything in a string until it's all done, and then it dumps it to a file. So this was actually using a regex pattern. You can change it differently, but I wanted to try to make it as, for me, as simple as possible. Not necessarily for everybody. But I do explain you can add the simple to just search for plain text if you want. But then I figured I would have to do multiple searches for what I wanted. So I figured the regex was a simpler way of doing it. And then the outstring, of course, prevents the cutoff, because if you cut off the end of the line, part of the data is at the end of the line. And I actually had, once I got all the data, I was able to put it into Excel. It could only read 1.7 million lines, which is how much data I accumulated, and I wasn't able to load all of it. It stopped at that point and said, that's all I can handle. But that gave me a good amount of data before we were only able to look at a couple of days and random times. This actually extracted just the lines I was looking for.
Out of curiosity, you're using a 32-bit version of Excel or 64-bit?
It's 32-bit version of Excel running on 64-bit Windows.
Okay. Yeah, you probably got more lines using like a straight 64-bit version of Excel.
Well, 1.7 was a lot more than we used to get on the old version of Office. So
Gives you a just a good one.
I think Microsoft recommends 32-bit still, don't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of added info work about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, we're doing a select string. Just like the other one, you tell the path. In this case, I was actually in the directory I was running, so you can use, similar to the other one, to give it a path to it, star.log, star.csv, whatever you want. And the pattern here was strictly to look for, I think it's a slash string. It was send, receive, and what was the other? Do I have that written in there? No, unfortunately I didn't put that. Basically, I isolated the characters. The way this regex is written, it's everything in each square bracket is a single character. So it's saying a choice of this character, a choice of this character, choice of this character. Again, to make it easier to see. So basically, I had SE. STOR for store. So if somebody was putting something, I had REL Basically, I had 3 words I was looking for. It went through. It said, I found this on the line, found something that fits the pattern, take it, put it into the queue. Take the next line that matches it, put it into the queue. And just keeps
You were
going.
looking at 3 words and each had 4 characters.
Yeah, they all had 4 characters. So if you only had 3 of the characters and 4th didn't match, didn't work. They just dropped it. So yeah, /s, the combination's a string and then the /s. It says all matches. Again, if you're going to use the dash simple for a simple string, it would go right after the dash all matches. And basically that just came back and said, search all these files, get every line that matches it, put it into and then return it. In this thing, I actually was saying to store it or put it into ftp log.txt.
So you're dumping it to your screen and then using your.
Well, actually, I have a greater than
Which
at the end.
Basically redirecting.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't go on the screen because 1.7 million lines flying up and down the screen would really slow it down. So it basically just got it and then pushed it out to the text file.
It didn't put any looping.
And then
Because that's an old DOS redirection.
Yeah, I know. At the time, I just needed to get it.
You gotta get it done.
Yeah.
Throw it back. Yeah.
So what this gave me is something in Excel where I was able to say, okay, here's the stores, here's everything else. And it did not include anything else that was, I'm connecting. I'm reading a directory. I am disconnecting. I'm logging off. I mean, you have many more millions of those lines. So this was isolating just the thing where people were actually doing stuff. And I came out, after making a chart, I came out with a 3D chart that had days of the week, hours of the day, because I also split it up. I can show the people that are here because I have it on my machine. Basically came out with something that said, okay, in 2 months, there were 2 transfers at this time of the day on this day. So, some of them were 1900, 2000 during that time of the day. So that basically gave us a nice thing to say, here's pretty much a safe time to shut down the machine and do it, because the people that we're dealing with are all external and trying to coordinate, was it 60 or more external people that are under control of other people in the company to tell them stop doing stuff during this time period is almost impossible. So I'll show the chart. Maybe I can actually hook it up here in a little bit. I don't know if you're on HDMI, right? I don't have.
Yeah. I mean, it has all the connections. We just have to
Yeah.
go with this connection.
We'll take a look at that there first.
Rudy, why don't you just bring up the link thing? I'm not sure someone's like a question.
Oops.
Check.
Okay, yeah.
If you don't mind, just to make sure. Sorry.
I was going to actually ask about that earlier. If anybody
So, hold on, sorry there. Dexter, so can't tell when that got sent through, so select everything awesome path. Where does this go? Look inside the content of the files it gets. Oh, that's Dexter, sorry.
I talked to him.
Yeah, no, you got it right there. Dexter, Jesus. That's right. Sorry. Dexter, if you don't mind elaborating in the next message, that'd be awesome. It looks like you already had it answered since you replied. Cool. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just there's no timestamp with these messages. I'm not sure when they came in. But if anyone else has any other questions, just send them to the screen. Sorry about that.
I don't think I have much more here. Nick binding order. We do system builds at work, and we came across one thing where I installed software and had to actually add another NIC for backup. And I was going through and I'm like, I tried to connect to the machine and I couldn't connect to it under the IP I was assuming it was. What happened was I added the other NIC, the NIC binding order changed on me. So I was like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have to check for this in our validation to make sure that the production network is the first one, because our backup is on a non-routable network. So we want to make sure that the order is correct, that the precedence is given to the production network. So,
Was it a VMware service? Was it a VMware guest?
Yeah, a VMware guest. I'm pretty sure it would function the same on a physical box as well. But I had to ask Steph to say, I remember you saying something about this. How do we go in? And you had to go into advanced. We go into networking, go to advanced, binding order, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, I have to go. There's got to be a way for me to find it. Well, part of it was I couldn't get it directly from WMI, so I went into the registry, and I go into the registry all the time with stuff. So this gives an example of a couple of things. We had Ashley McGlone come to our office at one point and helped us develop some other scripts for Exchange and checking on mounted volumes and so on, because our monitoring software can't monitor a volume that it does not have a drive letter, and these have mount points in a subdirectory. So we actually went through, wrote a script that would actually say, here's the mount point, here's how much free space it was, because we were running out of space and couldn't tell we were running out of space. And our NetApp couldn't say, hey, you're running out of space on that. It could only tell us you're running out of space on the volume or the aggregate, but not the LUN, because it can't see into the LUN. Only the host operating system could. So he had talked to us and told us about being able to CD into the registry to find some things. So let me just run this real quick, and can kind of, I can get the whole thing running. Okay, well, it doesn't work under Windows 8 apparently. On my system, what this would actually say is, oh, actually, let me, how do I get to the network on here?
I do just right click on that.
Window key on.
Or you can do it
And it's right there. Just type in CPA.cpa. Is that what you want?
Yeah, you got Wi-Fi in here. Let's see what the. Apparently,
I
I'm
think
gonna.
you're on the other.
No,
There's two instances. Oh,
no, this is
you're-
a.
that's fine.
What I would normally see is binding order. It would tell me, like, if we had N1 for NIC1 and then backup, it would actually come back with N1 is the top, and then
This
this.
makes full slots that have like a lot of like Juniper remote program stuff. It's probably pulling all the secure adapters that get lit up for the SSL.
Okay.
That's probably why you're seeing weird device names.
Maybe the storage patterns different.
I'm almost positive those are all like weird like VPN entries.
The three of them.
Yeah, like stuff like that. That's what I'm thinking. Yes, yeah, 64 or something like that. You probably do like a if you want to, when you say like if you Nick order, type in the select object and then say expand.
Well, if you notice, I have expand
Okay.
in the command line there. Expands the binds.
Okay.
And then we're actually splitting stuff apart here to get certain data out.
Okay, just those parts.
It's hard, but it's hard to.
I think you can select object again for that, and just you'll be able to expand those out by themselves on the very last portion.
Just do that.
Well, no. So see where it says Nick order. Your very last.
Okay.
When you just call Nick order, then rerun it through a select object and say expand, and it'll expand all those out.
So the prompt type.
Yes, the prompt.
Yeah, let's do that.
Nick order.
Nick order. I get to
Oh, yep, dollar sign.
I do.
I'm doing John.
Yeah, you're doing the same thing I did.
Nick order.
Pivot to select dash exp and then space bar.
Yeah, I don't think we're hitting.
Click Nick order again. What's it like?
Yeah.
Oh, net connection.
So apparently your Bluetooth is your
Yeah.
primary network.
That's weird. It didn't like the line.
Yeah, well, one of the things this came up with was, this led me to something else later on where, that Lito and I were talking about last week is, Microsoft keeps some things in one part of the WMI and another thing in another part. So you have like all the IP address information in one, and if you rename your NIC, it's in another key. So Lito was talking about using associator of. I haven't had a chance to play with it since the last meeting, but I had done some other things to, read all these keys, and there was an order that was common to both, and I would actually take it on here and say, okay, now read this, now get the information for this active card over in this one, but I need to spend some time absorbing it. I don't know if Lito will talk at some point about it.
Yeah,
later on.
I think the next thing.
But-
Whenever you've done, I think I have an example.
Yeah, but if you run this on the Windows 7 box, you'll pretty much, or 2008 or 2, you'll get a valid thing. I haven't tried it on 2012 or Windows 8, so that could be the Juniper Network stuff. But if people want to play around with it, it does a few different things in there.
Cool.
Now, I think that was the last thing that I had. Yep. Hopefully that was useful to some people.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure I can bring that up real quickly. Oh, any weird emails.
Sure. Huh? I didn't see it.
Yeah, no. My poor phone's probably screaming at this point.
So we talk about it a little bit.
Sure, if you want.
All right.
Sure, come up, say your name.
My name is John Nargang.
Introduce yourself.
I'm John Nargang. I work with Lito at Temple. I've worked with him for a few years now. This is something I wanted to do it last year, and I'm only about, I'd say, a year or so into PowerShell myself, and it drove me nuts last summer. So what we have at Temple is a domain run by a lot of people, and what we end up with are groups that are intended really only to hold groups sometimes. They're supposed to be nested. And sometimes, because there's so many cooks in the kitchen, you accidentally, unintentionally nest somebody in, or put somebody in the outer group that really is already in one of the nested groups. I said, well, how can I do this? And I got working without making a function. And then just for the fun of it, I started writing my own function, trying to get some practice writing functions. So what this thing will do...
Thank you, John. You talk closer to the
okay. Sorry, I got bad eyes, so I just gotta try and do the best I can to read that screen. It's a little easier for me. So what I started to write a helper function for this too. So in the
basically what this does, oops. Sorry guys. And I have my trifocals on, it's not going to help me. Okay. Can you hear me if I stand over here? Because it's hard for me to read that. Okay. Can everybody hear me? I don't know.
Talk real loud, man.
Okay, I'm just going to talk loud. Yeah. I'm used to talking loud. All right. So, this thing here, what it's going to do, let me scroll down a little bit.
Do you want me to scroll for it? You can have the keyboard and scroll down.
You can do the scrolling and I'll do the talking. Thank you. We're a team. Okay. I said, how can I sit there? And it was kind of like a circular thing in my brain last summer. It drove me crazy. I wasn't good with PowerShell last summer, and I just kind of dropped it, so I'll go with it. And then I went back at it, and actually another guy I work with helped me with a little bit of the one piece of it. So what I did here is I'm going to set a recursive, if you want to scroll down the body of it here. Yep. Okay. So I made a couple of variables after all this thinking I did. How can I tell if something's in an outer group and whatnot? Like the quest commandlets. Well, actually, I think there's a flag in the quest Q get AD group member or something. So, well, the native one doesn't have something like that. So I just did a recursive and a non-recursive search on the group, and I put that into that variable. I do get credential. I don't know how people feel about that. I was criticized pretty heavily during the scripting games for using $cred equal get credential, but I'm not fancy. It works for my needs at Temple. And so I went through and I looped through each of the entries in, and I compare them. And when I compare them, I told it to, oh my God, what did I do? Okay. So I told it to exclude anything different and include only what's equal. And so you'll get a side indicator. Does everybody know what the side indicator is? So, and what I've done too, for safety, I'm still testing this, so I've commented out the actual removal of the group. And I use the, shame we can't really run this right now. So I use the thing, I run one line at a time, and I look at my variable and everything. And I also have recently created a part that'll create a log file. So I can look at my log file and see what would be created, in addition to doing a what if. There's stuff in my log file. So if I audited this one group that I was testing with, I would find that I would get 142 entries that I didn't need in the outer group. The only catch that I found was that when I did this, if you don't have a nested group and you run it against something that's not nested, the way that logic is arranged, it's going to delete everything in the group. So I wrote in a little thing. Right now I did it with an if-then, but what I'd really like to do, if you look up the top here, I do it. Yeah, the very first thing, if I said, if I go in and I enumerate, and if there's no groups in there, a pipe group, no objects, it just, yeah. But I really would have, about a week ago, like the rest of you, I got 15 things to do at once at work. I was starting to write this little thing that would evaluate the true or false if there was groups in it. But if you just put that at the very first thing you do is you enumerate the objects in that group, and if any of them are groups, you're okay to go. So this works, like I say, I can take, and what I'm going to do is improve it a little bit so that we can actually use a file and get content, incorporate all that. I ran this by Lito in all his spare time, I know. I said, hey, Lito, do you want to help me with some, I was going to do try, catch, and any kind of validation if needed and stuff. Lito's really great with that, and I'm not experienced, so I don't, a lot of my scripts are like down and dirty. I did one for the scripting games that I think Glenn Sizemore blogged on, and he said he liked it because it was just old school and it just did what it did, and that's my whole mentality. I'm not fancy, but it'll get my job done during the day. So anyway, this group here, I tested it worked, and we just got so many people adding things to that group.
I found 142 entries I can get rid of. So share this with the group if you want. If you all have any feedback about it and feel like it could be improved, there it is. And if you have nested groups and you have problems, it might help you out in your. But that's about all. We'll just keep it short at that. I know we're kind of low on time tonight.
Cool. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
John, you're a perfectly good example. I think that sometimes these, especially in the PowerShell community, you see all this stuff about finesse and all that, and they forget the whole purpose of this is to get something done.
Yeah,
you spend so much time trying to optimize it and make it perfect. And I understand there's best practice, but to me, best practice is getting it done and making it reliable. And I don't, I think that kind of stuff makes a lot of sense.
I think this is, I'm confident in my enterprise that this would work without doing a lot more, but I'm always leery of what is it I'm missing that would cause a problem.
I'm all with you there.
But yeah, I mean, it's, you don't need to get real basic.
You're exactly right.
Get real fancy.
Because I'm kind of fighting at work with one of the guys who, he's always looking to, make it more efficient. To run anyways, so yeah, if you can cut 30 minutes off of that, that's great.
And there are techniques for doing those
Right,
things, but
but
let's
don't
get the basic
just
stuff.
get it done and run it.
It's
and then
crunch
worry
time for me, and
about
I do desktop support, I do Active Directory administration, I do all these other projects in addition to deployment. I've single-handedly made up a light touch deployment with 4 OSs and everything. And so it's crunch time. These aren't things I'm being asked to do. They're things I feel like I want and need to do, and I just do it.
Because I had to write one, and it was not a pretty script at all. But I had to go into VMware logs, grab out all of the errors.
That's what we're still
And I
presenting
just
full
had,
in the
and it was
link.
all straight.
Okay, I was gonna say I have
Couldn't
the
pull
that
it,
chart.
So I had to go find.
Yes, you're right, we can show it.
Well, this is, I anonymized.
Anonymized.
Well, because I had actual IP data,
Gotcha.
Well, I
But that's
sometimes
the-
feel reluctant to share that with anybody for that very reason,
That's
though.
sweet.
Is
So it's
that,
a
well,
chart
mine
that we
aren't
came
real
up with to
fancy, but yeah,
find
they do
out.
get the job done.
It's easy. It's not
I
that
can
hard.
people here that,
Yeah.
that's the people
And,
that
like you said,
probably don't
I
care
don't know
too much about it.
about this room, all they
I have a
do all day
little bit
long
more
is
control
write
now.
Yeah.
On the web.
Right. I'm so busy doing everything else.
I'm
that
just
I don't
curious
have
now what
time
this
to
is
become
gonna
an
spit
expert
out,
in this
isn't
thing.
it?
I'm a jack of all trades.
Yeah,
And that's what I
that's
have to do.
what the bummer is we don't all, I like PowerShell, that was fun, I did that to keep my brain going. And sometimes I push the envelope with my supervisors, because they don't want me focusing on any one task. It is interesting.
If you're spending 6 hours to write a script, then, it's gonna run for, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
I'd rather.
Well, that right there saves, I cleaned up one group that would have taken days of poring over to clean up. Yeah. So
I have a script, I use DPM, and I have a thing called File Streamer, which makes removable drives look like tapes, tape libraries for DPM. The problem is in DPM, in order to swap those, I have to manually unlock each device, unload the drive, relock the device, and then I do that 4 times, and then I have to go down to the room, swap the drives, and then redo that process. And I just found a nice little script as a starting point that I can just automate that process. It's still manual, but now I can just run it. It'll go through and manually do that unlock, unload, lock, unlock, unload, lock for 4 drives. And then I can just go down. The idea is that I get that script to where I tell my administrator now, go down, swap the drives, run that command. You're done. I'll do that, because that'll save, it saves a half an hour every week. I'll take the time to do that.
But I think a lot of times it comes to, a lot of people do spend a lot of extra time early on in the stage of getting a script that could be only like, 20, 30 lines, and they try to make it look all pretty, and it just, in a way, it's not
That's all
really
you
worth
got?
it a lot of times. Just put it in there, get it to work, and then if somebody's gonna
So,
have to manage it later, come back after it works and beautify it.
Yeah, I had
in
read a
2012
script
and
I had to
then
remember.
there's a built-in
more about
command. You can do
than I
so
really
much
want
more
to
with
right
the
now. And I needed it. We have an
and
old
like the
Active
native
Directory
NIC
that served
Okay.
in
stuff.
2003.
So there's a
And I
built-in
had
get
to
net
enumerate all
adapter,
the computers that were disabled or and
which is
still
pretty nice.
enabled.
Gives you like
Anyway, I had
and
to
then
enumerate
there's
a bunch of computers
get
in there and just
net
spit out
adapter
the name and the
advanced property,
canonical name.
and that'll give you like
I didn't
any
worry about
advanced
I will tell you that if
options that
anybody
you
looks
have,
at
like
that
through the
example,
driver.
if
Okay.
it gets shared,
But on legacy,
the parameter
like
thing, I'm not sure if I
yeah,
handled all
2008
the.
R2 and below,
I used alias
you really don't have
group
that
name. I'm not sure if
Was
I.
it
that
that
new
was the
rev
best
of
way
WMI.
Yeah,
to
version.
do
It's
things.
like,
I'm
well,
still
is it,
getting
can you just look at that
used to
information in
parameterizing.
WMI, but just like scattered all over the place?
Yeah, so these guys. So what I did is I put. Wow.
If it's for me, it's like 5, 8, 10 lines. If I'm giving it to somebody else, then I'll worry
But yeah,
about
it's the
making
same.
it.
The same
I'm
idea.
just active directory and lower down, do the error checking, I'm gonna do all the things that I would watch for, that they may not, so I'm gonna spit out logs or CSV or something.
But I will spend the time to put comments in there. so
Yeah,
you
I think
know
it's the
what
biggest
purpose is.
concern that's
Exactly.
voiced a lot
It
of
may not be
people.
the most efficient code, but the comments are there, because if I come back to it a year and a half later, if I've got my narrative of what I'm trying to get done and what's going on and what this function does, that's valuable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot of time.
And
You
it's
just write.
similar things with, I have scripts that are, 8,000 lines.
Yeah.
I don't start with those scripts with making them, well-formed, indentation, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
You get lost very quickly.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's like knowing ahead of time what it's going to turn into helps a little bit, but then don't let it supersede the priority of getting it done.
Yeah.
And once you start, when you start getting the habit of indenting a lot of stuff, you'll just automatically knock it out like crazy.
Once I got it to get it done, that's where I guess it's okay to share it and let you guys deal with like perfecting it somewhere.
Those are handful, very handy to have. I just find it sometimes, make that a one-liner. Well,
Yeah.
that's great, make it a one-liner.
Well, I think the one-liner stuff that's strictly that's like a teaching aid sort of thing. Yeah.
It's kind of neat stuff, and you learn things from it.
Yeah,
but
you
also-
don't want to put like one-liners in scripts.
That's
One-liners
what-
are strictly just so
Yeah.
they're an exercise to make sure like you know how to use the pipeline
Well, I do a
correctly.
lot of quick
'Cause-
one-liners that I share
Well, that
with
or if
people
you're
who
doing a lot
work
of
with.
console work.
Yeah.
You just need to get something really fast, the
Right.
one-liners are great.
Right.
But if you're using something like, I need a repeatable kind of thing,
But I'll find one-liners, I'll spend more time diddling around with getting the one-liner to work than I should have if I just done the one
exactly.
command at a time, and thank you very much, It's like, okay, I'm done.
So you make an excellent point about always including help. And one of the things that I wish, I love the ISE, and I love it especially for this feature called snippets. So if you go in and say Control J, or if you go into the menu and say Tools, is it? I don't know. I'm a shortcut kind of guy. Where's the snippets? Show. Start snippets. It's in the edit menu. But basically, either or, I like Control J. But you go down here and out of the box, you get these two: commandlet advanced function and advanced function complete. And if you hit tab there, boom! Like if you're writing a function, you have like a nice boilerplate to start from. But I really wish. I don't really need a lot of times when I go and I look at old scripts that I wrote and I'm like, oh man, I should really add at least a little bit of help to this. It's nice to have the ability to go in here, so you can add your own snippets, right? So I can say $comment help. I can put in I just copy and pasted right out of that default snippet, and then I'm calling this commandlet new ISE snippet, and you give it a title, whatever description you want to see, and then what the actual text is going to be. You can get pretty fancy and creative. You can create a caret offset, meaning if I hit, let's say I create a new file and I say Control J and I say comment help, right, which is the one I added. Boom, it's going to put it there. But notice where my cursor is. So if I add a caret offset and give it an integer value, if I count the spaces of the caret position, I can insert my caret and immediately start typing So if I'm at like a prompt or something and I want to say, new, let's say I do get command, get process, and I often like wrap this, and I want to see the definition of it. I could create a snippet for this line. Just put my caret right there. Then I can say, Control J, definition, or DEF, tab, and then start typing whatever the name of the commandlet is that I want to see the definition. So let's do it. So if I grab this, and I set that to...
Or say it's like any other command, you constantly run a lot, and then you have to constantly type in a variable, especially if it's a long command where it's like maybe get character 80, you need to type something in, and there's like another 100 characters after that.
So snippets get saved into your profile path, in your My Documents, whatever you set it to. So if you go into
was it June or was it what's his face from the Netherlands who went over this earlier, like it was a meeting or two.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, his name's escaping me, and I sent him one of our care packages. I can't remember off the top of my head right now.
What is the? I'm drawing a blank on what the shortcut is for that. But if I go to this path here, into his My Docs, yeah. What is it? This path here, not the actual ISE profile, but the parent directory. So like the Windows PowerShell. I'm having a brain fart right now. So if I go to C users John documents Windows PowerShell, it automatically created a folder called snippets for me, and then the snippet file is actually an XML file that has everything formatted in a way that the ISE understands. So you could like create all these at one time and then re-import them or take them with you to a new user profile path if you had something like that. So they're specific to your instance of.
Is there a place where that process is described so that you can go back and read it?
Yeah, check it out. So if you go to the help, get help about, I think, snippets. Yeah, I believe there's an about topic specifically for snippets and stuff like that. If not, it's probably in the ISE help topic.
So this allows you to build your own little snippet library that you have available.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd have him download the help out. I don't want to do it over my tethered connection and too extra. Any more than I need to do right now.
What do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Created a function called that's a function library. That's part of my profile.
It's help every time.
But that's
yeah, like I said, I've rarely used this to do any scripting on. It's strictly been like one-on-one call, remote, and do stuff, and for presentations.
So I counted wrong, but it's placed my cursor right at that point, and I could start typing. I could now start typing my commandlet that I wanted to use. So, I don't know if.
Could you copy that snippet folder to all profile user?
I believe there's nothing to stop you. Yeah, I believe that's supported, but you'd have to check in the about help topic. Yeah. Where'd my thing go? So one of the things that, so boom, Control J, comment block, right? You get a blank block, or you could say Control J, comment help, and then you can start typing help. I was trying to do something simple that would be like a reusable function that would give you the same information back through PowerShell that you would get through something like ipconfig all. And in Server 2012 and Windows 8, they have these really great commandlets that are available to you to do all kinds of work on network adapters and networking and configuration and stuff. Unfortunately, it's not available because it's all dependent on a new rev of WMI. So you're kind of like out of luck on 2008 R2 and below. But what you can do is you can basically query underlying WMI classes for that information. But you kind of have to go to different classes here and there to kind of pull everything together in a way that is going to give you something. Are we out? Meaningful, and present it in a way that's going to be useful, like ipconfig all is, pretty much the standard for. So I started with just messing around with getWMI object and creating using the query parameter. And on a Vista plus box, like a Vista and later, you'll have those built-in 6-to-4 and Teredo tunnel adapters. If you have other software VPNs and stuff like that registers itself as like an adapter, and you just do a getWMI and you query the Win32 network adapter class, you'll see like all kinds of extra stuff that you probably really aren't interested in. And a really simple way to clear it all out is, or to just get down to like physical adapters, is just put this where physical adapter equals true. So in my function here, what I'm doing is I'm populating that variable with the results of that WMI query into an adapters variable. And here I'm doing an if clause, and this is basically just saying it's supporting the ability for me to have the user provide this this status parameter. So if I run, make sure I have this loaded in memory. So the commandlet, or the script commandlet, or the function name is get-net IP address info. Probably not the best name, but you notice on this is a Windows 8 box, there's already a built-in get-net IP address. So when you're writing your own functions and stuff, you have to be mindful of not making name collisions occur. So I put the info at the end because Anyway, so info, and then there's this status parameter, and I configured the parameter. I decorated as a set. So I have these options called all, disabled, or enabled. So show me all. The idea here is show me all the adapters, or just show me the enabled ones, or just show me the disabled ones. And if I run, it'll return and spit back. Right now, there's only one enabled adapter. I think the Bluetooth adapter is actually disabled. Let's see. Yeah, so this is his Bluetooth device, but it's actually disabled. So what I did there was I just create a parameter as the variable's $status, and I said, let's validate it as a set, and here's my members. Now to support that, I check with this if statement. So if and this is like when I first started writing functions, so this is not the way I would probably go about doing it now, but I'm saying the first element in the array that gets passed, which is an argument, so my $args, which is a built-in variable, and then I'm looking at the first element and saying, if it equals enabled, then basically filter my list to just show enabled, and if it's disabled, So it's a very crude way. There's a lot more elegant ways to go about things, but you don't, like you guys said earlier, this works. It'll continue to work. It's just a matter of as your skills develop and you become more familiar with things, you go back and look at stuff and say, oh man, if I had to do this today, I could probably reduce that to one line, but.
Do you have a second to go back? It's pretty cool what you did with the validation set, but I don't know the mechanics of it. Can you explain it briefly?
Sure. So when you create a function and you use this param block, right?
Yep.
And here's where you're actually defining what parameters your function will accept. And it's basically just think of it as a list. So if we say param, there's an empty set. I could say $var1, $var2, and $var3. And now I have, I could say here, let's say function. Sorry for the keyboard is throwing me, but if I run that. So now I have a function called test, and I have automatically, the ISE is doing this awesome tab completion. So those are my parameters that I defined. In addition to that, what I did here was I add these things called parameter decorators. And it's a way for you, a lot of early on scripting that you would see on folks posting stuff online is they would actually do a lot of this logic and a lot of this hard work lower in the body of their script. And they would say, okay, well, check if the user supplied a computer name and if they didn't, throw an exception. You really don't need to do that because the parameter decorators, they support things like position equals 0. So it's the first argument. So without passing a name, meaning if I do this, let's say I want to supply an argument for var1, but I don't want to actually name it. So I'll just say, because you said it's position 0, if I add somebody else here and somebody else here, it's taking those values and accepting them in order. And then if you decorate your parameter to say that position 0 should always be computer name, it's going to take value and pass it as that variable. So there's all kinds of things you can learn in the help. It's really well documented.
That validate set, though, I've never seen that done.
You could make one mandatory.
So the actual parameter in that example is the word.
That's true. So
The actual parameter name is $computer_name. And what I've done here is I'm saying this variable is a type string.
Yeah.
And the additional square brackets means that I accept an array of strings.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to pipe a text file which line by line had computer names, it would pass each one of those through to the computer name.
And I'm assuming that's important if you're accepting values from the pipeline.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, otherwise if you don't have that, it'll only take one value.
You get the first element, and then he doesn't know anything else about it.
And also saying the property name, so you allow, is that where environment?
So basically he's supplying a default variable.
A common variable.
Yeah, if you don't supply me one, so initially this didn't exist. So there was no mandatory. You could supply a computer name or not. If you don't, then I'm using the env variable for the local host as the computer name.
By the way, there's an error in that script I just showed you. I just realized there's a typo. I should have written position equals 0. My script has position equal 1. But I guess
as long as there's no anything before it,
it won't break. But yeah, I goofed. I wasn't.
You could start position 2.
Yeah.
You could say 2, 3, 4, 5. It's arbitrary. And some people have a preference, like I start everything 0. Some people have a preference started as 1.
Yeah. But that validate set, I really don't understand the mechanics of that.
So validate set, this guy here. What you're saying is after the open and close parentheses, everything in here. Oh, sorry. So you're defining elements in a list essentially. So you have comma separated string values, enabled, disabled, and all. So if you had a parameter that you only wanted to accept, like let's say you had I don't know, let's go back to our test. Let's say those are the only values that will accept.
So the core of that is you don't have to worry about putting the logic in your script saying, okay, check if it's of these strings.
So that's like a drop down.
Yeah, like in Excel.
Exactly.
In a sense.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
When you do
But that
it,
is for the variable status.
Exactly. Status can be immediately following that, or it can be on its own line.
But it's almost like a type declaration.
So whatever you put in
Exactly.
validate set goes into the variable called status, $status.
well, no, those are the only values it'll accept.
The $status will accept. Okay.
Yep.
Are you able to put multiple validate sets for each of the parameters?
Yeah, you could do like, so let's say I wanted to have computer name only accept 3 different computer names. You could put a validate set up here. So now it would only accept computer names named enabled, disabled, and all as an option.
So that has to come before you actually declare the name of the variable?
Yeah, so everything above here is describing this parameter. And then these all get separated by this little guy.
Each of the parameters.
Commas, yeah. So depending on how crazy and how much parameter declaration you do, the missing comma or that can kind of be a bear sometimes. You can do things like you can have filters in here. So you could say like where it says validate set, you could say validate script and give it a script block and say, okay, well, I want to accept a telephone number, but I need to do a regex for that. So let me do, select string pattern and give it the pattern of a telephone number that you, so that way if the user gives you a telephone number to update your address book, you know that they're giving you something that adheres to your standard and not giving you garbage phone numbers. Did you have a question?
I think you just answered it. I was going to ask if you're given a text file of computer names, but you know that you only want the ones that begin with a certain set, can you then parse out all the rest by having a variable in there, as opposed to enabled, have it just be the first 4 characters that you actually want plus a wildcard?
Yeah, you could do like match a pattern and say like make sure that computer names begin with your department code or something like that.
So if you don't match the pattern, the function would just exit out, skip to the next record?
Well, you, as the script author, would define what happens. So when you do a validate script, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, evaluate this statement to true or false.
Yeah.
And if it's true and it matches the pattern or it matches the output of the desired of the script that you provide, continue. If it's false or it doesn't match the pattern, then you have to supply, or you have the option to supply your own error message to the user. So you could do a throw, and then provide some text to say, please provide some more meaningful text or something like that. So then in the begin block, because we're accepting data from the pipeline, it's kind of important to know that there's these 3 core blocks of code processing. There's a begin, process, and end. And the begin fires once and only once at the beginning that the function or the script runs. The process block, for however many elements or items are flowing through the pipeline, it will iterate through, and the process block will run over and over and over again, and it will process over all those items as they come flowing down the pipeline. And then the end block, just at the very end, if you wanted to output an object, or you wanted to clean up some, variables or references to memory or something like that, you could just put that in the end block. So the begin block, this guy, again, stuff that I wouldn't do now, but this is just defining an empty hash table called params. And then in here, I'm saying if I get a credential. So if params.credential, like just stuff the credential that the user supplied into that hash table. And what I'm doing here is I'm defining a script block. So I have a variable that I name script block, and then I typecast it as square bracket script block, and then immediately following just curly braces. So everything that happens inside this guy is treated as, a separate block or instance of code. And really all it is how if you query stuff in WMI, depending on the class, you'll get numerical values as results, but not meaningful text. If you go to MSDN and look up, like, what does a 33 mean? There's like a whole nice table there that they put on the documentation that actually has meaningful text. So that's all I'm doing here. So I'm saying if the value that I get back using the switch statement is 0, then it means that the adapter is enabled by DHCP. So this is just a way.
Ours is actually a built-in thing, isn't it?
What's that?
$Rs, is that actually built in?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I'm still trying to learn about that a little bit.
So the idea, the idea is that if I have, let's say, I'm trying to think how I can demonstrate it quickly. If I do,
I avoid it because it's ambiguous and it seems to confuse people.
Yeah.
So I always declare my variables.
yeah, it's a real lazy man's way of like, you know.
The arguments get passed to the right.
Yeah.
And you do argue.
And I really did no effort here to clearly define what it is, the type of parameter that I'm accepting. It's just like whatever crap you gave me after you typed my function name, that's my args and that's what I'm accepting. So in this case, because it's a helper function and the user's not really calling it directly, I know that, well, I assume that my input is just going to be that one numeric digit. And then my out is the default message, which is if I get anything other than what I expected, you know, a 0, 1, or 2. If I get a 3, it's gonna be unknown. So again, like an empty defining or declaring a variable for an empty array set.
So what's the problem? I mean,
There really,
it's just old school. It's
there
just
really,
the
there
way
really
we-
is none.
Yeah, that's the way we were taught way
So-
back, is declare your
Yeah.
variables and stuff.
PowerShell's cool and flexible in that it lets you do everything like dynamically and on the fly, and you really don't have to worry about stuff like this. And there's other cool features of the language that will let you completely do away with having to do that. Habits die hard, you know. Sometimes like going through that process of learning, you know, what the difference between declaring it up front and not helps your understanding and learning over time.
Well, I mean, the way a lot of people used to do it is you would do that declaration with a comment following it saying what this is for.
Yes.
So that then as you're reading your code,
Yeah.
you know that results is for a particular purpose.
Yeah.
And that's why you do it.
Yeah, the naming, like the names that you give your variables, the longer and nastier and hairier your scripts become, like the more important that can be for your sanity later trying to figure stuff out.
Now, are you able to do in VB script, you can say option explicit? Or sorry,
I think so.
Where actually if you didn't declare your variable, it would say, I'm not going to run because I'm not defining this declaration.
PowerShell has a cool thing. It's called set strict mode.
That's
And
the equivalent of the old option explicit in VB script.
pretty, as far as I understand it, pretty much, yeah. It makes you, it forces your script, it will not execute unless you've already previously declared all your variables up front and adhere to some standards of coding practice, best practice,
So
yeah.
if in VB script, if you like had the case different on the variable.
Yeah.
Like, no, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, go enable set strict mode here, and the thing will surely blow up and complain about, you know, a number of things. And then it's a good way to learn. Like you go and look at all those things that you messed up, and then take a look at it and say, oh yeah, well okay, that makes sense. Like I should probably pay more attention to.
Because you might mistype a character and you had
Absolutely.
this variable equals this, and then you're calling the variable and saying, sorry, it's not there.
Absolutely.
You know, I used to see them mixing your starting cases and there.
Oh yeah, this is a nightmare. So I populate this variable called adapters, right? And it's basically like holding the contents of my WMI call. So if I just run this, you know, it's pretty boring, and it's going to just run that query, and there's what I get natively out of PowerShell. But if I take that, this is where I said earlier that I was doing my, you know, enabled or disabled filtering. So then I take adapters and I just pipe it to for each. And here I'm setting a variable based on the device ID. Oh, somebody blinking? Okay. No questions, right? And then what I'm using is that device ID variable to get the this associators of. So this is a way, like if you have multiple classes that are essentially they share primary keys. I'm not a very savvy SQL guy. I did horrible in that class in school, but if you think of a SQL join where you take two primary keys and you join them, and you get all the matching or resulting data from both tables linked, that's essentially, as far as I understand it, what we're doing here with WMI. So we're saying, give me the results of the Win32 network adapter configuration class, where they are associated to the device ID of the Win32 network adapter class. So in both classes, if you query them, you'll see the the device IDs for each NIC. And essentially the associators of lets us easily link those. I say easily, but this is like, it took me a while to figure out the syntax of this, where result class equals and all that fancy stuff.
If you ever want to see, just real quick, if you ever want to see a graphic representation of associators, the WMI toolkit has an excellent thing that runs in your browser where you can actually go in and show the associators of an object. It'll map out your entire namespace graphically for you in a web browser. So if you're in doubt, it's a good tool. The WMI toolkit really helped me with that over the years. Sorry, thank you.
No. So there's a great series of blog posts that I can have added to our follow-up meeting notes. But basically, a PowerShell MVP, I think, did an excellent job of breaking it down and really going into depth as far as the associators of and WMI and how it relates to PowerShell and how you can get more and more out of it. So then I've got like data from both classes, right? So I have my adapter configuration data, and I also have my raw adapters variable. I wanted to get the relative path, and the relative path is if we inspect what we're passing down the pipeline from the $adapters variable, you'll see that there's a property called path and then a subproperty called relative path. That's the relative path in terms of the adapter or the interface. And so I take that and I say, do another query, give me the associators of the system driver. So I want to see what is the driver that the adapter's running. And I use rel path, that variable, to basically expand out this gnarly path to the device ID. Adapter, driver. So the actual driver file, like to get the actual something.sys or something.inf, I have to cast it as a file info object for type, and I only want the first element because you could get multiple sys or inf, or multiple results from that adapter driver. So I take the first element, careless, not checking for additional stuff, just show me like whatever the first thing is, and then give me the path name property on that. For the very limited testing I've done, works great. And then basically I say, like, if I have obtained a DHCP lease, I know that I can do some conversion. There's a built-in method in WMI. A lot of people will try and take, like, they'll do a WMI query and they'll get like this DMTF formatted date. So it's like a whole mess of a date. Plus there's a letter, like a capital T in there, and then some zeros and dots, and it doesn't really look human friendly. It's a standard DMTF date format. There's actually, if you inspect the WMI object, there's a convert to date time method available to you. You just have to call it. So let me see if I can show you what I mean more clearly. So if I go, I think of a, well, what was that guy? Network adapter configuration. Network adapter. Man, I'm striking out. Oh, dude.